So scanning your film is one of those things that's just gonna lead you down a deep, deep hole. Probably gonna lead you to depression, frustration, and wondering what you're even doing with your life. You have options from the professional lab scanners like a Noritsu or a Frontier. You have semi-professional-ish scanners that are still fairly reasonably priced to the consumer, kind of. And then you have even more affordable to the consumer, like the Epson V600, 700, 850 or 800. I don't remember all the numbers. I have an Epson V600. That thing is absolute trash. Okay, let's be fair. You can do some black and white 35mm and 120 format film and get decent results from a scanner like that. Anything color though, 35mm or 120 format. 120 format is a little bit better. 35, you'll almost never get something that's even good from the Epson. Now, is it possible to get decent scans from it? Yes, it's definitely possible to get decent scans from it. In fact, there are some color scans that I've done that I have enjoyed from the Epson V600. But when it comes down to overall scanning and digitizing your negatives, there's two things that are constantly battling. So today we're just going to talk about digital camera scanning. But the thing that's always fighting against digital camera scanning is professional lab scans. All I'm going to say is this. For a long time now, I've camera scanned pretty much all my film. Now, that's not to say that lab scans aren't good, but here's the thing with lab scans. It depends heavily on who you send your film to, what they're gonna be doing, how knowledgeable they are. There's so many variables that factor into what you're going to receive on your end. When you scan everything yourself, you kind of have control from start to finish entirely. The only problem, well, there's a lot of problems with scanning your film yourself. Oh, there's a lot that goes into that. And we're not gonna take the time today to talk about all of that or how to set up your camera scanning setup. This is just if you already have a camera scanning setup and if you're already scanning your film at home. There's tons of videos about how to set up a camera scanning setup, the settings to use, all the different things to watch out for. So we're not gonna talk about that. That could be a video for an entirely different day. This is just a video where I'm going to compare 3 different pieces of software. One of them is its own piece of software. Another one is a plugin for Lightroom, which might have its own standalone piece of software coming later this year. And the other one is pretty much just a script that's run through Photoshop via an action. I've used Negative Lab Pro for about 5 years now, maybe 6 years. And I've only used FilmLab for pretty much this past week. I did download a trial of FilmLab last year and I didn't like the conversions that it was giving me. This is an entirely different version than what was out when I had done the trial before. And I got an email about some new updates with FilmLab, so I said, you know what, I'll try it. I kind of want to do a video comparing the software anyway, so I reached out to Abe at FilmLab and I said, hey, would you be open to just extending my trial so I can try it a little bit longer and maybe make a video and compare them? And he said,
you greedy piece of shit. I'm not running a charity. This ain't no charity. You think I'm Bill Gates rich over here? You think I spend all my free time just developing software so I can just give it away to ass, cheap ass photographers like you?
And so he did give me a month extended trial, but this video is not sponsored by them in any way. I'm not trying to talk on, Negative Lab Pro or FilmLab or Grain to Pixel. Anything that I say, I'm not trying to talk, so I don't want anybody to take anything as negative. There are going to be times when Negative Lab does better than FilmLab, and there's times where Grain to Pixel does better than Negative Lab or FilmLab, and there's times where FilmLab does better than either of the other two. There is definitely points to be made when you're talking about ease of use and price and just overall speed and tools and just how the workflow feels, aside from just the initial conversion of the negative. Okay, so future me just kind of checking in here. After I had some more time to actually spend with each one, because I felt like I was making too quick of a judgment having only used Grain to Pixel for like 2 days and having used FilmLab for, about a week, but then also having used Negative Lab for years now, I feel like it wasn't enough time with either of the other two to really give it a fair comparison. So I went back through and I used Grain to Pixel a lot more, as well as FilmLab. I kind of left Negative Lab Pro on the side and really focused on the other two to really dial in what I did and didn't like about either one. FilmLab still came out on top, but I want to take a second to talk about the positives and negatives of Negative Lab Pro and Grain to Pixel as well, because I want this to be a completely fair comparison, and I also want to say that the one that I ended up sticking with in the end is actually the one that I would have least expected to stick with. But for those of you out there who are really serious about, shooting film and scanning your own film at home, this could actually be a really great result. So let's just take a second to talk about it. First of all, let's go over speed. For speed, I gave Grain to Pixel a 2 out of 5. Actually, you know what? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go over the rating for each of these, and then we'll go into a little bit of a deeper dive as to why I gave them the rating that I gave them. So Grain to Pixel for speed got a 2 out of 5. FilmLab. So let's talk for a little bit about why I gave these the ratings that I gave them. So for speed, I gave Grain to Pixel a 2 out of 5. It gets a 2 out of 5 rather than a 1 out of 5 because it's not really the slowest thing in the world, but it's pretty damn slow in comparison to FilmLab and Negative Lab Pro and other options out there. I gave it a 2 out of 5 because I don't really know how much it's doing in the background. It could be doing a whole hell of a lot in the background and actually doing it quite fast for what it's doing. Seeing the conversions that actually come out of it very consistently, I would say it's probably doing quite a bit of really good analysis on the image. Plus, you get the contact sheet on the end, which I think is really a cool feature. If you want to generate a contact sheet, it'll do that. So FilmLab gets a 5 out of 5 for speed. It's incredibly fast. There's almost no wait time between rotating, flipping, or converting your negative, even if you're doing a whole batch of 30 or 50 or 100. So Negative Lab Pro, I gave a 3 or a 4 out of 5. Let's just call it a 4 out of 5 because it's really not that slow. Sometimes it can be a little bit slower depending on how many images you're working with and how much you're telling it to do. Overall, I would say a 4 out of 5 because even though it's not as fast as FilmLab, it's still not very slow. It's nowhere near as slow as Grain to Pixel. And I've had completely good results just out of the box with Negative Lab Pro very quickly. Plus you have roll analysis. It goes through a lot of different stuff. Price, I gave Grain to Pixel obviously a 5 out of 5. It's free. You don't have to pay a cent for Grain to Pixel. You can, and you probably should, at least toss $5 or $10 to the developer because he's doing a fantastic job at making this and just giving it to everyone, just making it available for free, which is crazy. FilmLab and Negative Lab Pro, they both tied in the price category, both being 4 out of 5. So the reason that I gave them both a 4 out of 5 is because I don't think either one is incredibly expensive, especially for, just what you're getting. Negative Lab Pro is maybe a little bit more expensive when you look at it from a perspective of doing updates on every big update that he puts out. But I think I've either paid only twice, maybe just once for updates on Negative Lab Pro, and I think I paid $50 for the update. It could have been less than that. So I've spent somewhere between $100 and $200 on Negative Lab Pro, and it's been such a huge benefit to me that I would say that amount of money for the amount of time that I've saved, I think that's just totally worth it to me. Now, FilmLab, even though it ties Negative Lab in this category, I would say FilmLab maybe has like the littlest point of somewhere between 4 and 5, but I can't do like 4.3 out of 5 or 4.7 out of 5. But I would say it has that little edge over Negative Lab Pro because there is an option to spend $200 and apparently what it says on their website, get every update and every feature added in the future for free. So if that's the case, then $200, I don't think that's really that bad. If you're doing this seriously and if you're very serious about it, you probably already have some money invested into your scanning setup and everything else. So you might as well just spend a little bit extra so you get some good quality scans, right? And you don't have to spend a ton of time doing it manually in Photoshop, because who wants to do that? I don't. I've done it before, and the result is not as good as any of these can do. I mean, it can be, but it's gonna take you a lot of time. Ease of use, grain to pixel, I gave a 3 out of 5 because it's not incredibly difficult to use. It's actually not really difficult to use at all, but if you don't know anything about scripts in Photoshop or loading them or doing anything with actions at all, or if you just don't use Photoshop in general, it might just not be the best one for you. But if you're comfortable with Photoshop and at least comfortable with following tutorials on how to install actions or import actions, so if you're open to just learn it, then hey, go for it. So FilmLab gets a 5 out of 5 because it's just the easiest software that I have ever used to convert my negatives. It's its own standalone software, so it gets even another maybe bonus point for being standalone software, so you don't have to run Lightroom or Photoshop or anything else to just run it. It's its own thing. It's incredibly easy to use. The panel's not intimidating at all. It kind of walks you through exactly what you need to do and doesn't give you any weird complex areas like, you know, a color grading in your shadows, midtones, highlights, and you're setting your white and black point. It just kind of gives you this density slider, which is nice, and then some other options for contrast and temperature of the photo itself. Ease of use, I'm gonna give Negative Lab Pro the 4 out of 5 because again, it's like not very hard to use at all. It's just the fact that it's not its own standalone and it's a plugin for Lightroom, and if you're not familiar with how to use plugins for Lightroom, it might be a little bit of a hurdle to get over. It's not difficult at all, but it's just something additional that you have to think about. So being that FilmLab is its own standalone software, you just install it, open it, and you're ready to go. I think it just gets that extra point for the ease of use. But Negative Lab Pro is really not much different other than the fact that it is a plugin for Lightroom, so it gets that other point taken away from it. Now, I have heard that Negative Lab Pro is going to get its own standalone software, but I haven't heard anything else about that recently, so I'm not gonna speak on it because I don't know enough to speak on it. So we'll just leave it at a 4 out of 5 for right now. If it does get its own standalone software and then has a huge update, and if it works anywhere near as good as grain to pixel for color conversion, I don't know, man. See, I've had Negative Lab Pro for like 5 years, I think now. Has it been 5 years? I think it's been 5 years that I've had Negative Lab Pro. It's worked fantastic for pretty much everything that I've done. FilmLab I've been using, like I said, for the last like couple weeks, and then grain to pixel I've given it a bit more time as well. And like I said, I have stuck with grain to pixel now, and we'll get to that in a second. But first we're gonna go over features, because grain to pixel gets a 2 out of 5 for features. It doesn't really have many features. There's not anything you can do. You can't do your rotating or your flipping horizontally or flipping vertically or anything like that. You can't do your contrast adjustments or density adjustment or any type of adjustment like that at all. You essentially get the ability to crop your image in and tell grain to pixel, hey, this is, you know, what I want you to do, and it runs with it. Spits your images out into TIFFs, or you can do JPEGs, and then it loads them all up in Photoshop, or it doesn't have to load them in Photoshop. You can click the option to not open them in Photoshop, but all the other editing you're gonna be doing in Photoshop. Any flipping, cropping, rotating additional to that, you're gonna be doing all that in Photoshop, and it's kind of a little bit more destructive than Negative Lab Pro. FilmLab and Negative Lab both tie 4 out of 5 for features, because each one kind of has their very own unique set of features. FilmLab is very stripped down, very straightforward. Here's the tools that you need. Here's the tools that pretty much everybody uses in negative conversion. So we kind of stripped it down and made it much user-friendly, and here you go. Negative Lab Pro, on the other hand, gives you a lot more features and a lot more profiling and toning that you can do to the image to really dial in your final look, which, I mean, if you spend enough time with all those tools, you can really get amazing results with Negative Lab Pro. So that kind of leads us into the next one, which is color and what you get out of the box. I'm not gonna talk about what you can do after adjustments to your image. If that were the case, then Negative Lab Pro might even tie grain to pixel 5 out of 5. We're talking what you get right out of the box, what the software itself will give you just with the straight conversion, no additional adjustments. Grain to pixel, after I've worked with it a bit longer and fed a lot of other negatives through it, and even rescanned some of my old negatives that I scanned terribly before, I've seen incredible results with grain to pixel just right out of the box. FilmLab and Negative Lab Pro, they both get a 3 out of 5 because they're very hit or miss. Some things will work great in Negative Lab while they work terribly in FilmLab, and then vice versa. So it's really hard to pinpoint which one is actually better. You'd really be bouncing between each one to get the best look if you were just trying to get something really good straight and do no additional adjustments at all. You know, I know there's a lot of purists out there that say, well, I don't edit my film. I don't do any color correction in my film because film needs to be film and film should just be what it is.
And I don't do any editing whatsoever because I am a pure, real, true to the heart photographer. I don't do any editing. Editing is for thieves.
And then meanwhile, these are the people that send their film off to a lab and have the lab scan it. So I'm sorry to break it to you, but the lab does editing on your pictures. They do color adjustments. They adjust the tint in the shadows, the highlights, the brightness. They do all of that when you have them scan it. Unless, of course, you tell them to just not touch the scan at all, then sure, you can get some decent scans, especially when they're using something like a Noritsu scanner or a Frontier scanner or any of the other numerous scanners that there are out there. However, 99% of the time, any lab that you send stuff to, unless you tell them not to, they're going to do the adjustments on your images, because film scans just need adjustments. And that's the difficult part, because there's really no way of saying what the film scan should look like. One lab you send it to is gonna make Portra 400 look all bright and airy and pastel-y because that's what people really have come to like from Portra 400. Other labs are just gonna give Portra 400 a very basic look. While certain film stocks do have their own characteristics and looks, it's really down to who is doing the scanning and editing at the lab, or if you're doing your own scanning and editing at home. There's so many variables at play here that you never know what exactly you're going to get. You can send it to 20 different labs and then have them all scan it, and you're gonna get 20 different images. And if you get a terrible lab where someone who's doing it doesn't know anything about editing photos or doing anything in the lab in general, like maybe they're a new lab or whatever, or they got some kid working the machine like me when I was right out of high school, I was doing all the color correction on the computer and I just wasn't fantastic at it. I wasn't bad at it, but I wasn't great at it. So you could be getting someone like that. So take that as you will. Back to the points. Grain to pixel at the end gets a 17, while FilmLab gets a 21 in first place. Negative Lab Pro in second place is at 18 points, only 1 point ahead of grain to pixel. And if we gave the speed of it a 3 instead of a 4, it would actually tie grain to pixel at a 17. So why am I still using grain to pixel if FilmLab gets a 21? I find that even though grain to pixel falls short on some of the other stuff, the most important thing is the color conversion and the quality of that color conversion. I find that even though grain to pixel does take a little bit longer to use and it's a little bit weirder of a setup, and I do have to use it in Photoshop, it's not its own standalone thing, I find that it gives me the best result just right out of the box that I can then work with and edit from much better than what I get from FilmLab or from Negative Lab Pro. That being said, if you were to buy one today, and if you're not super in the trenches in your film scanning and you're just looking to get a good result, then FilmLab, I think, checks all the boxes for something that's at a really good price point and then just super easy to use if you're not looking to get really in-depth with things. If you're okay with getting a little bit more in-depth with things and you want to look into something that might have its own standalone software very soon, and you're okay with doing a little bit more adjustment, then Negative Lab Pro would be the next choice. But if you're already using Negative Lab Pro or you're already using FilmLab, I would suggest giving Grain to Pixel a try. Even if you're not using either of the other two at this time, give Grain to Pixel a try because it's free. See how you like it, see if you can get your workflow moving with it, and then just go from there. And I guess that's all I have to say. So I'm gonna go eat a sandwich. I'm so bad at this. All right, let's crop myself in here. So after I did like 2 hours of editing the other day on all of these other film scans, I realized all the footage just wasn't good enough to use. Okay, I'm here for a third time because the first time the audio is messed up on both sides of everything. And the second time, I just feel like I didn't really give a very fair comparison between the three different things that I was comparing because I just hadn't used grain to pixel all that long. I'd only used it for like a day at the time. And then FilmLab, I've only used like a week or so now. I just didn't feel like I gave them a very good, fair comparison. Now that I've had a little bit more time to work with the other two and really try to dial in results, I've found that I get far better results from grain to pixel for my personal taste. And that's something that's really important to note because your personal taste might be completely different than my taste in what I want my photos to look like or what you want your photos to look like. Let's get started in Lightroom. I just rescanned some stuff from 2022. It's Ektar 100. So I haven't done all of these yet in Lightroom. I just imported these after I scanned them earlier today. So I'm gonna go through all of these here in Lightroom and then I'll speed it up and then we'll just start going over the conversions here and then we'll do them in FilmLab and then we'll also do them in grain to pixel. All right, so I have all of them flipped and white balanced, rotated, everything, how they need to be. This takes a little bit longer to get these prepped in Lightroom to get them ready for Negative Lab Pro. I mean, you don't have to do it beforehand, but I do like to do it beforehand. In FilmLab, it's super easy and they even have an auto crop, which I would say 9 times out of 10 gets the crop pretty much exact. And if it doesn't, you can make the small adjustment because it's pretty non-destructive when it comes to FilmLab. I would say just in that regards, FilmLab is like the fastest. So let's just start with this image and we're gonna convert this. There is a shortcut key for Negative Lab Pro, by the way. I don't have the shortcut key set up. Oh, it wants to do a black and white. Let's not do black and white. So the settings that I'm gonna do are negative, or obviously negative. Source is digital camera. It generally does a pretty good job at picking up on that, whatever it is. So don't even really worry about that. The color model is gonna be Noritsu, and then the pre-saturation, I'm going to have at 3, which is just the default. Border buffer, I'm gonna have at 0%. I've cropped everything in to have no border. And then I'm gonna just click convert. And this gives a pretty good result. This is Ektar 100, which I've found just seems to be one of the most difficult films to convert and actually get a good result straight away. So that's great. I'm not gonna touch the tone profile. I'm not gonna touch anything. I'm just gonna apply it. I'm gonna leave that as it is. All right, so now I have the first image opened up in FilmLab and I'm gonna go through the process and this is gonna be all done in real time. So I'm gonna start by rotating it right, then I'm gonna flip it horizontally, then I'm gonna click the crop here and I'm gonna crop it down. And the next one I'll do auto crop on. This one I just wanted to do manually so I can make it as fair as possible between the two. Now the process up here, I'm gonna click the drop down and I'm gonna click color negative. And as you can see right out of the box, it looks a bit more red and magenta in the shadows. And the sky maybe looks a little bit better. Let's take a look at what we have in Lightroom. Actually, I think the sky in Lightroom in Negative Lab from Negative Lab Pro looks a lot better. The color obviously from Negative Lab in this scenario actually turned out a lot nicer than the color from FilmLab. I don't really know what happened with FilmLab here. Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm dumb. So one cool thing about FilmLab though is you can go over here and you can actually choose a film stock. So by default, this was on Fuji Color C200, but I can go in here and I can actually click on Kodak Ektar 100 and it'll change the entire kind of tone profile for that film stock. Now, I still don't think it's as good of a result as I got from Negative Lab Pro for this photo, but it's still a really great starting point default to your image. Now you could like warm it up, you could take some magenta out, that's too much probably. Make small little adjustments here. Overall, you can get a pretty good result from FilmLab with very minimal adjustment after the default conversion. And now we're gonna check out in real time how long it takes grain to pixel to work through an image, but also see the quality that grain to pixel gives us. Now, I hope grain to pixel doesn't let me down here because I've been talking it up so much about its color conversion. But I'm gonna say, given that almost 100% of the time it was giving me fantastic results, I'm gonna run with that and we're gonna see what happens. So in grain to pixel, I already have my settings all set up the exact way that I want them. This isn't gonna be a video doing a deep dive showing how to set up these settings in grain to pixel or anything like that. I actually just followed the video on the grain to pixel website anyway. So honestly, just follow that. I might've made one other adjustment, but regardless, I'm gonna come into grain to pixel. I'm gonna choose that image, same image, and I'm just gonna click run. Now, it's at some point very soon going to pop up with an image, with that image, and it's gonna tell me to select the crop for that image. So you can see how long it kind of takes and sits around. And I have a pretty decent computer, so it's definitely not my computer. It could be because I'm running multiple different softwares and a whole lot of other stuff right now, but regardless, even when I'm not, it does take a while. So it might have taken slightly longer here, but it's not enough of a difference to really account for that difference, if that makes sense. Does that make any sense? That probably doesn't make any sense. All right, so you can see real time exactly how long it's taking to do this conversion. And you can see that I wasn't able to flip or rotate or anything before doing this conversion. So I'm gonna have to do that after, which is kind of frustrating because now I have to look at my converted image on its side, which is just kind of, I don't know, whatever. All right, so I click close window now, and I actually have shortcuts set up so that I can do a quick flip and rotate. Now the result from grain to pixel is incredibly good. The tonal range, the dynamic range between the highlights and shadows, the actual color output, it's like somewhere right in between what FilmLab wants to give and then what Negative Lab is giving. So Negative Lab, you can see, is a lot better in color, as where FilmLab kind of tinted the shadows really weird, and well, I did some adjustments here too, but by default, you know, you saw what it looked like. And then grain to pixel, we have a very flat, which is what you want when you're going into film scanning. I know a lot of people think like, oh, it looks flat. I don't want a flat looking scan from my image, but you want to think about this like it's your raw file. You want to have a flat image to start with, because you want to be able to do editing in those shadows and highlights and adjust the contrast of the image. So by default, I would say the greens are really great in here. The shadows are have a little bit of a blue tint. I think the pink in the flowers here looks really good and natural. I think the sky has the best dynamic range between I think overall the picture itself has the best dynamic range. Especially for editing purposes. I think it kept the most detail in the sky. It's not much different than Negative Lab. It's about the same as Negative Lab. I would say it's just a little bit flatter and maybe kept a little bit more detail. Again, it's down to personal taste, but I feel like grain to pixel has been giving me the best results out of any of these for numerous images. So drop in the comments, let me know which one you use, which one you prefer, why you prefer it. I don't know, let's have a conversation. Or tell me that I'm wrong about everything and that this video sucks.